All right, your last week of class. Actually, I'm making this video. Let's see, I haven't done week 8 yet, so had a lot of other stuff to do today. Week 8's going to take a little bit of planning on my part. So I thought, well, I'll do an easy one. And week 15's an easy one. And as I probably told you in my introductory video, which I haven't made yet, I tried to kind of weight things to where, okay, by the end of the semester you're getting tired and stuff. We don't have as much work to do on the, at least on the weekly quizzes. I will say that then you get the paper due, but hey, it is a college class, right? And let's see, this one is on how economists contributed to the financial crisis, all right? So this kind of leans back to the 2007-2008 financial crisis, and as it says in the reading, which is a very, very short piece from Forbes, it says that, man, everybody's getting blamed for the financial crisis that took place that caused unemployment to reach the highest point it had since the Great Depression. We exceeded that in COVID, but it came down a lot faster, right? So we had high unemployment for a long time. So in most respects, the 2007 to 2009 recession was worse than the COVID one, just not like that sudden jump in unemployment that took place in COVID. So anyway, everybody getting blamed, right? Well, but a group that I think that avoided their fair share of attention was mainstream economics. And I've made this clear throughout the semester. Let's see, I just rebuilt my room here. And let's see what how that light is here. I got to get all this done, by the way. Our daughters are coming home for Christmas. Today is December 12th, I think. 12th. And this is where Meg's going to be sleeping. So I need to have it all cleaned up. I got to get all the videos done. All right, so as I've explained throughout the semester, there's a lot of things in mainstream economics, especially mainstream macroeconomics, that I don't think makes any sense. And that would be just fine if they, like let's say that people who interpreted the works of Chaucer were all wrong. Well, that kind of sucks for them, but it doesn't do much to you and me. But what if physicians were all wrong about the way disease worked? Well, that would suck for all of us, right? Because then we would not be getting good policies and good prescriptions and so forth and diagnoses. Well, that's what I'm saying here about the economics discipline. And that is that not only were they way off, but the rest of us paid a big price for that. So let's look at what the mainstream economics did that helped contribute to the financial crisis. And you know, a big part of what they did was they provided the intellectual justification for many of the policies that then led to the crisis. They stood by when, you know, jobs went overseas. They were like, no, that's no problem. Remember, we're going to assume full employment, so there's going to be a job, right? Might be at Wendy's now, but still. And when we have these increasingly uneven distributions of income, lax attitudes towards antitrust laws, they said that's fine, don't worry about it. And many of the safeguards we had put in place in the financial sector right after the Great Depression, they were all taken away. All right, now, was there some politics involved? Yes, but economics was not saying, oh, don't do that, that's a bad idea. They were saying, yeah, you're right. It makes sense. Take away these safeguards that we put in because everything's okay now. Kind of makes you think of Minsky, doesn't it? When he talked about the fact that when things are calm, people lower their guard, and this is true of policymakers as well as those who are actually involved in the macroeconomy. Now, let's see here. What else have I got here? Okay, there was the central focus of this piece I'm having you read is a poll that took place online about who was most responsible for the financial crisis. Which of these economists, and this was obviously done by non-mainstream economists, people in my school of thought, they put together a poll and they said, okay, of these mainstream economists who contributed to the problems of the financial crisis, who would you label as the worst one? Who caused the most problem? The winner, with 5,061 votes, 5,061 votes, was Alan Greenspan. I'm sure he was all excited to win something. It says here in the article, As chairman of the Federal Reserve System from 1987 to 2006, Alan Greenspan both led the over-expansion of money and credit that created the bubble that burst and aggressively promoted the view that financial markets are naturally efficient and in no need of regulation. That financial markets are naturally efficient and are in no need of regulation. Now, coming in second, and this is who I actually voted for number one, with 3,349 votes, was Milton Friedman. I mentioned him before, back when we were talking about inflation and the money growth leads to inflation argument that he put forward that I said didn't make any sense. And this is what it says in the article. Friedman propagated the delusion through his misunderstanding of the scientific method that an economy can be accurately modeled using counterfactual propositions about its nature. All right, so what he said was, this is one of the things I learned in graduate school, it doesn't matter how unrealistic a model is, as long as it predicts well. Okay, except I got a funny feeling that the more realistic it is, the more accurately it's going to forecast things, the more accurately it's going to predict things. But he threw that out, and this simplistic model of the economy caused a lot of problems. Get this is brand new information that we didn't have until a week or so ago. All right, so this is very exciting here. The person who came in third with 3,023 votes, so it was quite close between him and Friedman, was a guy named, you may have seen his name in the paper. Papers don't exist anymore, John. Larry Summers. He was former Treasury Secretary in the U.S., and he was an economist at Harvard and the World Bank, and he worked successfully for the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which had been created after the Great Depression to try to stop more financial crises. So he worked actively to get rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. Now, why was I so excited about this? He just received a lifetime ban. I don't know if this has ever happened before. He just received a lifetime ban from the American Economics Association. American Econ Association. He may never participate in their conferences or be a member ever again because guess whose name came up in the Epstein files? Larry Summers. All right, so got nothing to do with our class. But of course, it's not covered in this article, which is from 2012, all right? So it was shortly after the financial crisis was over, about 3 years after the end of the recession. Wow, and he caught all kinds of crap for other controversial things he has said in between this happening, this 2012, and him being banned from the American Economic Association. He is in trouble a lot. And so anyway, apparently the link was very clear and obvious to Epstein Island, and he is no longer welcome. So, what a group of characters. All right, now, as you know from other things I've talked about here, and of course, when I was writing this back in 2012, I'm not assuming any background knowledge, but you've already got some by now. I said, well, how could these people create models and then influence others in the creation of their models of the macroeconomy? I dropped a pen there. Where'd it go, John? That's a good one. I found it. It's a purple one. All right. Why were their models so separate from reality? All right. And the argument is that, well, it's the incentive structure in the economics discipline. As you know from actually the very first reading you had for this class, the incentive structure in the economics discipline, how I succeed, how I make myself look good, how I get people to say, boy, that John Harvey, he's a heck of an economist, is I build complex mathematical models. I don't necessarily build models that explain the real world. Now that sounds crazy, doesn't it? And you're probably thinking, that can't really be true, John. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a guy come present a paper in our department, a real nice fella. He was one of our former students, And I don't know if I've already mentioned this in one of the other videos or not, I can't remember, but it fits really well right here. He came in to talk to us about artificial intelligence and its impact on the labor market. Very complex mathematical model that he put together. He took us step by step through these various stages in the model. He assumed away unemployment. I think that's kind of what everybody's worried about, is AI and technology taking your job away. And he's like, well, let's not assume that anyone ends up without a job, all right? So he said that twice. Not only did that seem awfully strange to me, but none of my colleagues who are in the mainstream, none of my colleagues thought there's any problem with it. Like, oh yeah, well, unemployment's kind of hard to explain, so he just kind of assumed that away. Maybe somebody else can work on that later. Oh, I don't know, like maybe Keynes almost 100 years ago? Anyway, so very, very common in our discipline. An example I bring up in the book, I'm sorry, in the reading, is about his explanation of the Great Depression. And I won't, I won't bother you with the whole thing, because that's why I assigned a reading. You can read about it in there. But let me just tell you this. And this, by the way, when I learned this in class in graduate school, is when I started thinking, have I made a mistake? I had no backup plan. There was, as you know from the very first reading, my first major was physics, and then I ended up in political science, and then I found econ. It's like, oh my gosh, I love this stuff. But in graduate school, we were learning stuff that just didn't make. I thought that undergraduate to graduate would be, let's get rid of all those unrealistic assumptions we made just to make the model simpler, and we'll start making the model more complicated but also more realistic. And that's not what happened. And so when I learned Friedman's explanation of the Great Depression in one of my master's level econ classes, I thought, you gotta be kidding me. To Friedman, in his model, he says the reason that unemployment rose to 25% is because the money supply fell, which lowered prices, which caused firms. Okay, so here. So I already disagree with him on the money supply bit, but let's stick with him for just a second. Let's say John Harvey doesn't disagree with that part. Money supply goes down, M superscript S for money supply, which leads to lower prices, which causes firms to offer lower wages because they can't make as much money. It's focused on it kind of okay. That led people, I'm just going to write this, Q-U-I-T. People quit their jobs because they got lower wages. Underneath that little bright, is it this one? No. Anyway, it just says quit. Falling the money supply leads to falling prices, leads to falling wages. People voluntarily quit their jobs, all right, because they didn't realize, the argument in his model is that they didn't realize that prices had fallen. And so they just thought they were getting screwed. So 25% of the American workforce quit their jobs on purpose. Does Friedman believe this? No. He knows it was involuntary unemployment. He knows people got laid off. But remember what he said. Doesn't matter how realistic the model is as long as it predicts well. So as long as it's true that the money supply did fall in the United States, as long as that's true, and as long as, let's see, I'll use red here. As long as the beginning of the sequence and the end of the sequence, and I'm going to push this back just a little bit and see if that helps that glare there. Oh yeah, it did. Okay, good. As long as the beginning of the sequence and the end of the sequence fit, well, close enough. Close enough. Stuff in the middle doesn't matter. All right. Doesn't matter how realistic it is as long as the model predicts well. And I say the last part being true. Well, no, not quit necessarily, but there certainly was unemployment. There certainly was unemployment. He's right. He's right. The money supply did collapse for different reasons than he thinks. And there was a lot of unemployment. And so this is the explanation he made up to try to show how those two things were linked, all right? Now, you might think, again, and so that was very frustrating to me. I really loved economics, and how can you believe this? How can you believe this makes sense? All right, now, just to show you it's not just me. There's a very famous book, came out in 1990, published by a fellow named David Colander and Arjo, A-R-J-O, Klammer. And it's called The Making of an Economist. And what they did was, they did extensive interviews with graduate students at all the big name schools. MIT, Harvard, University of Chicago, Berkeley. They interviewed the students to ask them, what are you learning in class? So again, they're asking economics graduate students, what are you learning in class? And what do you like and dislike, right? And one of the things that they asked them was, they asked them to rank the following things in order of importance in terms of succeeding in their graduate program. And they had, oops, I was going to say they had 7 things, and so I started to write 7, sorry. 4, 5, 6, 7, right? They had 7 things on their list. I'm going to read them to you here. You're going to see them right away in the article, so I want to mix it up a little bit right here so you don't know what's coming, because it's incredible. They asked these students at MIT, Harvard, and so forth, which of these skills is most important to succeeding in your graduate program? And we've got things like having a broad knowledge of the economics literature, ability to make connections with prominent professors. Let's see here, excellence in mathematics, having a thorough knowledge of the economy, being interested in and good at empirical research, being very knowledgeable about one field, being smart in the sense of being good at problem solving. Now, you may have noticed one on there that I mentioned, having a thorough knowledge of the economy. Guess where that came in? Having a thorough knowledge of the economy came in dead last. According to graduate students in economics at Harvard, MIT, University of Chicago, Berkeley, all these big name schools, all right? And they said, nah, that was kind of the least important thing. The first one was being smart in the sense of being good at problem solving. Second was excellent in mathematics. All right, so problem solving and math up at the top. Having a broad knowledge of the economics literature and having a thorough knowledge of the economy came in dead last. All right, and this again, it's not coming from me. It's coming from people who are in mainstream economics. All right, now I'm a critic, so I'm obviously going to take a different perspective. But then I didn't always have that perspective. It grew as I learned more and more. So in addition, in my job, even though our department is just an undergraduate department, we're adding a master's program. But since for the last 25 years, our department has only been an undergraduate department. Honestly, publishing is what gets me a raise. All right, so the publishing game is really a big deal. Now, what kind of articles really give you a good chance of getting published in the big name journals? Right, so I'm moving on here to not the students, but to the professors themselves. The ones that are more general, theoretical, and mathematical. If you did a very specific article, the book that you're using that I gave you just the PDFs on, it's in the other room. U.S. Business Cycles 1954 to 2020, the book I wrote. I also wrote several articles based on that. Articles on specific things, specific eras, specific countries, specific institutions are even if they're well written and firmly grounded in theory, you'd have a tough time publishing in top journals. Bottom line is, the more general it is, the more likely you are to get a really good publication. And so you end up with the following. People learn in an economics graduate program some generalities, but they don't learn much specifics about the real world. I'll give you an example, and this is me as the example. I was in line at the grocery store not long after I finished a PhD level course in international trade theory in a class on imports and exports. And I made the highest grade in the class. It was a really hard class. I was very proud of that. I made the highest grade in the class. And while I was standing there in line at Kroger's, I thought to myself, you know what? If the other people in line knew that I had just finished a PhD level course in imports and exports, I would not be able to answer a single question they would logically have. What's our biggest import? I don't know. It's either X or Y, because that's what we always used. Who's our biggest trading partner? Country A? I don't know. We didn't do any of that. We did lots and lots of matrix algebra. And you know what we found out in there? That if you expanded much beyond 2 countries and 3 goods, that the math didn't work very well anymore. So you know what we did? We just didn't expand beyond that. All right, so I enjoyed the class. I got nothing against math. As you know, my first major was physics. I really, and so that's why I did so well in that class. I was like, sure, I'll invert some matrices, which is what we did a lot of. I had no problem with that. It was a lot of fun. I just didn't learn a dang thing about the real world. And there's no incentive to learn more once you finish your PhD. Maybe you think, well, they give you a basic set of skills, and then in order to really succeed, you've got to go off and learn stuff about the real world. It's not completely devoid of that link, but it's a lot of it there. All right, so again, this doesn't mean nothing useful gets done, but there's some built-in incentives against getting useful stuff done. Also, I don't mean to say that all economists did this. Many did raise the alarm about the financial crisis coming on, right? If you look, and I don't know if I don't think I ever showed this quote anywhere in the chapters or anything, but there's a guy named Paul Krugman who is a mainstream economist. He wrote a piece after the financial crisis, why economists didn't see it coming. Not true. It's just your school of thought didn't see it coming, all right? And he's in the mainstream. There was a second poll. You know, I showed you the poll a minute ago with, what was it? Who was at the top? Greenspan. Greenspan, Friedman, and the now exiled Larry Summers. They did a second poll, and this one was, who do you think most accurately forecast the financial crisis? And these were all non-mainstream economists, because the mainstream didn't think it was coming. And the winner, by a wide margin, was a guy named Steve Keen. Steve Keen, all right? He was an economist at, let's see here, University of Western Sydney, all right? Who most accurately forecast the financial crisis? Steve Keen of the University of Western Sydney. And it says this on the webpage where they gave him this award. In December 2005, now the financial crisis is going to hit late 2007. In December 2005, drawing heavily on his 1995 theoretical paper, and convinced that a financial crisis was fast approaching, Keen went high-profile public with his analysis and predictions. He registered the webpage www.debtdeflation.com, and that he dedicated to analyzing the global debt bubble, which soon attracted an international audience. And he's on TV in Australia and stuff like that. I know Steve. I've known him for a long time. And I was asking him about this. And he said he was actually, what made him pursue this was, okay, so first there's the 1995, actually I'm going to get into that in a minute. He was going to do what they call expert testimony in court the next day. You know, people will hire an economist to say that, I lost my left arm in a machine, and this is how much the company should reimburse me because this is how much my left arm was worth. So it's an expert testimony. The economist will show, well, based on these studies and the lifetime earnings that person will no longer get is. So he was doing something like that, except somebody had done a breach of contract, as I recall, he was going to say in court, and I can't remember why, that debt to income, private sector debt, households and firms, the ratio of their debt to their income had gone up tremendously in Australia. And he said, I got to thinking, I think that's true, but I haven't looked at the numbers in a long time. So he looked at the numbers. He was like, oh my gosh, it was worse than I thought. How much private sector debt had gone up relative to people's incomes. And he said, well, but that's just Australia. I wonder about the United States. Oh my gosh, it's even worse. And that's when he dropped everything else he was doing. I think he did do the expert testimony the next day because he was getting paid for that. Dropped everything else he was doing and started this web page where he was explaining to people, oh my gosh, something terrible's about to happen. All right, so let's see here. Started appearing on Australian radio and television. Started his monthly debt watch reports and so forth. Now, something that's really important about this is that he wasn't, what's that, Chicken Little. Isn't it Chicken Little that runs around saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling? He wasn't doing that. He hadn't been always saying there was going to be a financial crisis, and then luckily, one day there was one. Oh, I was right. It's like saying every day in Phoenix it's going to rain. Well, eventually you're going to be right, but not because you knew what you were talking about. No, this he based on a paper he had written in 1995. And, by the way, highly mathematical. Steve Keen is a computer programmer, all right, so he knows math. He has designed mathematical programs to use for economics because he thought that our existing tools were no good. So that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing right now. He's really invested in some computer programs that he's put together. But anyway, highly mathematical paper, 1995, Journal of Post-Keynesian Economics, and it's called Finance and Economic Breakdown, Modeling Minsky's Financial Instability Hypothesis, right? And you know who Minsky was and everything by now. And there's lots and lots of math, but there's no like, I erased it. People are quitting their jobs on purpose during the Great Depression. There's none of that. I mean, he's trying to base this on, he's trying to pull his assumptions from things he's observed in the real world, all right? And do I agree with the whole thing? Actually, there's a couple of assumptions in there. I think, they don't make any difference to the conclusion, but I didn't think that was the right assumption to make. But anyway, so you're still going to have arguments with people. There's going to be different arguments, right? There's going to be arguments about things that actually matter, and not about things like, did people just quit their jobs during the Great Depression? That doesn't really matter. If that's what we're arguing about, then we're screwed when we get started. Now, here's some things that he says in the article, and it's all in the reading that you have. Among his key conclusions are, capitalist expectations of profit during booms can lead them to incur more debt than the system is capable of financing. Well, that's straight from Minsky, right? He built that into his computer. It was a computer simulation. He built that in. A breakdown results when there's a debt-induced recession, leading some capitalists to go bankrupt and lenders to write off bad debts and suffer capital losses. That's what the financial crisis was. They'd loan lots of money to people who really couldn't pay back, all right? But that meant they could charge them higher interest rates. And then all of a sudden, they're having to write off these bad debts, and we're having a debt-induced recession. People are defaulting on their loans. He also said there's going to be a rise in income inequality that leads to a period of instability and then collapse. And people have been talking about that. Both political parties in this country talking about the fact of the disappearance of the middle class and the fact that the rich are getting richer and richer relative to everybody else. And both political parties have talked about this as a problem. And he says that his model predicts that would happen. A long period of apparent stability is in fact illusory, and the crisis, when it hits, is sudden, occurring too quickly to be reversible by changes to discretionary policy at the time. All right, so we had this long economic expansion in the 90s. All right, he said that was the calm before the storm. That the foundation of the high levels of debt relative to income were being established in the 1990s, and that once it hit, in late 2007 and then through 2008, it came on way too fast, is what he's arguing there, for us to really stop it. Right? We should have already been preparing to make sure this didn't happen. The weight of the collapse may be so great that monetary and fiscal policies are powerless to reverse the trend. Right? And by the way, 1995 is when this article came out, right? That's in the middle of that 1990s expansion. That's in the middle of what was at the time the longest economic expansion in post-war history. Even the Roaring 20s weren't as long as the 1990s were. It was 120 months, the 1990s expansion. It's exactly 10 years. And everyone at the time, all the mainstream economists at the time in the 90s were saying, oh, it's a new economy. Recession's been banished forever. Don't worry, everything's great. And that's when they started pulling off. This is under a Democratic president. They're pulling off all kinds of safeguards in the financial sector. Clinton was also in charge of cutting money on welfare and things like this. Like, yeah, don't worry, everything's going great. We don't need all. It's like you've been doing a great job at the circus as the High Wire Act. You know what? I don't think I need the nets anymore. I'm really good at this. And then you fall. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the course. I wish we could have met in person. I really, really, really like teaching this course, and I thoroughly enjoy the classroom experience. But otherwise, I hope that you got some feeling of sort of a personal connection by me sitting here in my Horned Frog sweatshirt. May the Force be with you.